We are located in the VMI building right here on the screen. You'll see it. It's across from the Children's Hospital and also kind of catty corner from City Hall. So we are on the second floor where you get your name badges. Those are up on the third floor, so you probably have been there before. The Division for Academic Success is kind of a twofold office. So on the one hand, we offer support to students who have documented disabilities to make sure that they receive the accommodations that they need while they're on campus. We also, on the other side of the coin, we work with any student on the MCV campus for academic support services, whether that looks like time management or organizational skills or study strategies. We work with students on any of that. So I want to talk a little bit about the disability first, mostly because I have a lot of students who will report to me that they have a disability or that they've received accommodations sometime in their past, whether it was high school or undergrad, but they have been reluctant to ask for accommodations while they've been on MCV campus. They oftentimes state that they don't want to have stigma attached to it, or they don't want to seem like they're not up to par in their program. They don't want to be looked down upon. I want to reassure you, you're not going to face that on our campus. And if you do, you need to reach back out to me and let me fight that battle, because it's not your fight, it's mine. But quite frankly, on any given semester, we see over 1,500 students on our campus alone who receive accommodations in one form or another. So it really is a non-issue. Programs, professors, faculty, staff, they're very well accustomed to working with students with accommodations. So if you have a disability, if you have any need for accommodations whatsoever, please, please, please reach out to our office to see what we can do to help you. Because the trick with accommodations is that you're not getting like a leg up on things. You're not getting some kind of special treatment. What you're doing is you're leveling the playing field. Okay, so if you have, let's say for instance, you have ADHD and you have been used to having extended time on your exams. I don't have ADHD. I don't need that extended time. You're getting extended time doesn't mean that you're getting an advantage over me. It just means that your brain processes things at a different speed than mine. So you need that extra time to accomplish the same thing I can accomplish in the, I guess, average time or lesser time. So please don't feel any kind of intimidation to come receive an accommodation, okay? What's considered a disability? It's any physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. So it's talking, seeing, hearing, learning, walking, etc. Here are some of the ones that I've seen from students. I don't have listed on there, which I really should list, because two of the main that I see are anxiety or depression. And quite honestly, since we've gone on lockdown last semester on through this semester, those are the two that I see most commonly. Even if someone had anxiety issues or depression issues prior to COVID-19 coming into play, it seems like all of those are being kicked up right now because of the isolation, because of everything being virtual, just because life looks the way it looks. If you're experiencing something you've never experienced it before, maybe you've never been diagnosed before, please come see me, because we can even talk about where would you go to get a diagnosis, or what does it look like for you right now that maybe you need temporary disabilities accommodations, not necessarily something permanent. So you see, I love animals, so I always have my little animals in my presentations. Here's my little squirrel, not actually my squirrel, but I call him mine. So temporary disabilities, I have injuries and broken limbs on here, but I do want to emphasize anxiety issues, depression issues, they can also be relatively temporary as well. In the clinical world, we call that adjustment disorder. Okay, life now has gone virtual. People are having a hard time adjusting to it. That's considered adjustment disorder. It doesn't mean that you have something necessarily debilitating for the rest of your life. It just means that you're having an issue going through something right now. You can still receive accommodations for those disabilities. Please, please, please reach out if you need to. Okay, I do want to note pregnancy is not a disability. So if you need accommodations regarding a pregnancy, you'll want to reach out to the Title IX office. Okay. What happens if you see me for a disability or for accommodations? If you see me or if you see my colleagues, you will need to provide us with documentation from your physician, whether it's your therapist or it's someone who saw you in the ER, whoever it is, your PCP, whoever can give us some kind of documentation stating that this is the diagnosis, this is what they're going through, and this is my recommendation for them in the academic realm. We will provide you with a letter. Your diagnosis is never disclosed. It is never leaves our office unless you give us written permission to do so. Okay. So it will just be a letter, much like the one you see on the screen. It will say, per ADA, the student receives these accommodations. You will send it on to your professors and receive those accommodations going forward. Okay. Accommodations are not retroactive. This is why I always like to emphasize this in pretty much every presentation that I give on campus, because I'll have a lot of students who will say, well, I received accommodations when I was an undergrad or at a different university, and I thought maybe I'll just see if I can do without. And then they've taken the first exam and they bombed it, but they only have 2 exams in their entire class. So now they've really got to ace the next one in order to pass the course. We can't make them retroactive. Come see me as soon as you think you might need an accommodation, okay? Because they are only good from the moment you send that letter to your professors forward, okay? They can cover clinical setting to some extent. Like if you get extended time on exams, you're not going to get extended time with a patient. That just, it's a technical standard that it's not going to be able to rearrange. But if you, for instance, need to be able to miss a clinical or make up clinicals, something like that, we can work with that. So please come see me, even if it's something that you're not sure if you can get it. Let's talk about it, okay? Again, everything is confidential, not part of your VCU record. So I put that aside. If you guys have any questions, please feel free, raise your hand, stop me. Now that we've talked about the disability support, I'm going to talk about the academic support. This is kind of really what the crux of our presentation is here today. This is probably the ugliest picture of our office. This is the testing center. The testing center is used primarily for students who have a documented disability and receive extended time on their exams. I will say this, in a non-COVID world, this is where students would always take their exams with extended time. With the COVID in place, it's only the exams that would be taken on campus anyway. So the classes that are on campus and testing on campus are testing here. But hopefully one day, if we're all ever back to campus completely, this is where that would be. Time management strategies is something that I work with students a lot. If you need any help figuring out how to manage time, how to get everything into your schedule, please reach out to me. I'm always happy to help. When I did my graduate program, I commuted from Richmond to Baltimore once a week to complete the program for 4 years. I had my family here in Richmond, I had my full-time job here in Richmond, and I had my clinical internship here in Richmond, all while commuting up to Baltimore. Anyone can figure out how to put your life into a schedule. I can do it for you. So time management strategies, study strategies. Studying looks very different, or needs to look very different in any of the MCV programs than it did in undergrad. So please don't hesitate to reach out if what you did before isn't actually working right now. Test taking skills, I know that tests look very different. I hear students a lot will come to me about tests saying, well, it kind of goes down to 2 correct answers, but one's more correct. How do I know which one to pick? Note-taking skills, the MBTI, which is the Myers-Briggs, I know how to facilitate that. I'm happy to work with students with the MBTI. Learning connections inventory is another assessment tool that we use sometimes to look at your learning patterns and kind of see how can we satisfy your learning patterns, even if they don't necessarily jive with the way that your course is being taught. So these are just some of the things that we do for everyone on our campus. Okay, so now we'll look at your study habits. I want you to think about, how do you typically study? Do you like to study alone? Do you like to study in a group? Right now, that can be very difficult if you like to typically study in a group, or if you find that studying with at least one other person is helpful. I will say honestly, I think that is helpful to have a study buddy, but I know I've heard from a lot of students saying, well, I always studied with my cohort. Now my cohort, a good portion of them don't want to meet in person because they're concerned about COVID, and then they don't want to meet him on Zoom because we're on Zoom all the time and it's just not, conducive to studying. So then how do you work around that if that's the way that you typically study? Okay. Do you like to study in the library, in the dorms, kind of on the fly, wherever you are? I will say this was a little more applicable, I think, in a non-COVID world. I had a lot of students who like to study in Starbucks, or like to study in the library, or just kind of in the different university buildings. And now, of course, not that they're closed, but a lot of students aren't going to them because they don't really have all these open spaces, or if they do have open spaces, you have the social distancing. So if you're used to studying elsewhere, how do you study that's effective for you now? Particularly if, let's say, you're in an apartment with one other person and the only place you have to study is your room. Definitely not the ideal place to study. So how can you make that work? Okay. Do you like to take notes or not? One of the biggest things that I hear from students that trips them up is they are used to rewriting all their notes, and that's how they've always studied. And now all of a sudden they have a 100-slide PowerPoint that they got on Monday, and then next Tuesday they're going to get another 100-slide PowerPoint for another class that they're going to have to study as well. And oh, by the way, on Wednesday we're going to get another 100-slide PowerPoint from the class on Monday. So now I have to study both of those. You can't rewrite all those notes. Please don't try to rewrite all those notes. It will tie you up. You will have no time to rewrite, and you will have no time to study. And you also have no time to sleep, which is the most important thing, okay? I want you to think about, what have you found to be the most effective? Because if you find things that have been super effective for you, how can you keep some of that, particularly if what's been effective for you has been rewriting your notes, but now all of a sudden you don't have time to do that? What can you do instead? Maybe can you just kind of rewrite the important things, make bullet points? Is that going to be enough? What has been the least effective? Have you found that being in a very noisy environment is very ineffective for you for studying? Are you able to get into a quiet place now? Do you have kids at home because they're not in school? Do you have a spouse at home who maybe isn't working in person, they're working virtually, you know? So are you able to get that quiet space, or are you in a least effective place to study? Okay, and have your study habits always been the same? Have you tried anything new? Okay, I just want you to just kind of be thinking about these things as we go on with this, okay? So why should you consider changing your study habits at all? So I love this comic because I think it describes, in a nutshell, what all of the programs pretty much give you when you come onto the MCV campus. Hey, come in, I'm ready, good to go, I've got my little notebook, and all of a sudden this overwhelming amount of information comes at you, and it comes at you fast, okay? So, I mean, if you think about it, think about how much information that your doctor has, or your dentist has, or you know, your nurse has, and just, oh my gosh, it's so much information, and yet you have 2 to 4 years to learn all this, you know? So it is a lot that's thrown at you at one time, okay? And it can be very overwhelming if you don't take time to really sit back and say, okay, how do I need to change and alter myself to make it work? Okay, so start with the big picture. You want to definitely know your syllabus. When you get your syllabus at the beginning of the semester, read it through. What are my exam dates? What are the big projects that are due if I have any? What kind of reading is due? When is it due? What are the courses going to look like? What are each of the sessions going to look like? When you know all this stuff, you can better prepare for how am I going to handle this semester, okay? I always recommend, and I don't have it on here, I think it's on another slide, about using your calendar. So if you have a calendar on your phone, plug in all of your exam dates, all of your quiz dates, so that you know at a glance, oh, well, I have this coming up next week, I better be studying. Or I have this tomorrow, I better make sure I get a good night's sleep. Okay, so you want to make sure you have all of those ahead of time. I know when everything is. Read ahead. That's one of the things that a lot of students tell me they just cannot do, because you have like 50 to 100 pages that you're supposed to read today for the class tomorrow or for the class on Friday, and you just don't have time to do it. So I'm going to say, think about, you know, okay, well, what does the reading look like? Is it a PDF? Is it something that I could use naturalreaders.com? That's a great website if you haven't heard of it. Natural Readers with an S on the end.com. You go and you basically click and drag. You can put in a PowerPoint, you can put in a Word document, a PDF, pretty much any kind of file you can put in there. You can pick the speed and it will read it back to you. So that can be a big help if you know that, yeah, I want to read ahead, but I don't have the time because I still have to make dinner, I have to clean the house. You can put that on in the background so that it's reading to you while you're doing work. Okay, so that's something that a lot of students will find helpful. If you have reading to do in the book, what are the summaries? Do you have a summary in the front of the chapter, at the end of the chapter? Read that first before you actually look into the chapter, because that's going to pull out all the big key points for you first. And so if you know what those are, then you can go back and skim through the chapter and say, okay, well, let me make sure I touch on these key points. If they don't have summaries, do they have questions at the end of a chapter? Because if they have questions, those questions are going to pull out those big pieces for you. And then you can go back and kind of skim through and see what is most important. If you don't have either of those things, look at the bold headings. Look at, underneath a bold heading, read the first paragraph and the last paragraph. Can you kind of ascertain what that whole section is about from reading those two things? Okay, so those are some tricks to do when you're reading ahead or trying to read ahead, or even if you're not ahead, if you're just trying to read and catch up with class. Okay, organize summaries, headings, then fill in. Kind of when you're going back and you're doing the notes, or if you're doing notes in class, sometimes just write down the big ideas. Can I write down the big idea? If I've got that, then I can go ahead and fill in the details later. Okay, test yourself. This is a huge, huge deal for students, is being able to anticipate what kind of questions am I going to see on the exam. And if I'm able to create a test for myself or create a test maybe with a study buddy, then I can at least have an idea of, okay, this is what I should prepare for. This is how I should prepare. Okay. Focus on what you don't know well. I have a lot of students who will tell me that when they sit down to study, they just pull out everything. Like, I'm just getting my backpack, pull out everything and study all of it. Don't do that. Please don't do that, because you will definitely be overwhelmed. What I recommend is, if there's anything that comes easy to you, is something you already knew, makes sense, put that aside. That's the kind of stuff you definitely want to study later on when it's closer to the exam. You want to put it before your face and say, yep, I remember that, good to go. The stuff that trips you up, stuff you've never heard of, stuff that's very foreign to you, a concept that maybe you're having difficulty grasping, things like that, you're going to want to actually see every single day until you know it well. I always think about it like a song, right? Because you hear a song one day and you're like, oh, Bernie, I love this song. You can't tell me who sang it. You can't sing me any of it. You don't know any of the words. Can't tell me anything about it. You've only heard it once. You hear it a few more times. You can maybe sing me the chorus. You hear it every single day for a month. You can probably sing it in your sleep, and you're probably sick of it. Okay, so when that's the case, you've got it. You understand it. You know it inside and out. You want the same kind of concept with your studying. So you want to take that stuff that just isn't sitting well with you, or it's just not clicking. That's the stuff you want to focus your energy on every single day until it becomes old hat. You're like, I got it. And you want to do studying every single day. I know it's the thing that students never want to hear, but you're going to have to do it. Okay. And self-care. Self-care is the number one thing, because honestly, if you don't put gas in the tank, your car's not going anywhere. Okay, so you have to take care of yourself before any of this will work out. Right? You definitely want to focus on the big idea. I have a lot of students who will say, well, I've got all these notes, but then they didn't do well on the exam because they didn't know how to apply it. That is the big trick that they're looking for, particularly on the MCV campus, is how can you apply it? So you may need to be able to memorize everything in anatomy class, but do you see how that's going to fit in to everything else? So I can use an example that I had from a student in dentistry a number of years ago, and he came into my office and said, I'm just really having trouble. I don't understand why I need to know all of the neck and shoulder anatomy. It makes no sense to me because I'm going to be focusing on teeth. And I said, well, here's a true to life story. A number of years ago, I went to the dentist because I thought I had TMJ. I had just, my jaws were popping, just pain everywhere. I said, it's got to be that. The dentist sent me over to an oral surgeon. The oral surgeon listened to me, listened to my symptoms, poked around on my neck for about maybe 2 seconds and said, you don't have TMJ, you have myofascial pain. And I had no idea what he was talking about, but apparently they're little muscle knots that get up in your neck and get up in your shoulders, and they send referred pain up into your jaw and up into the teeth. I was absolutely floored. Went and got physical therapy for that. The TMJ symptoms disappeared. And so I told him this, and I said, that's why you need to know all these things, because when a patient comes to you presenting with symptoms, you're going to be able to say, well, I want you to see a surgeon, or I want you to be able to say, okay, let's try your neck. Let's see if this pain is coming from there or if this is actually legitimately coming from your jaw. Okay, so you really want to make sure that you're understanding that critical thinking piece and what is the big idea in all of this. Okay. So some classroom strategies. This is a little different for those of us who aren't necessarily on campus right now and everything's virtual, but I know that a lot of the classes are still meeting at a particular time, still being Zoomed, so treat it very similarly. You want to make sure you get to lecture early enough to not feel rushed. If this is an on-campus class, you're definitely going to want to allow yourself enough time to get there. I know I live south of the river, so getting to BCU can take me 20 minutes on a great day. It can take me 45 minutes or more on a very rough traffic day. Okay, if there's a lot of accidents on 95, chances are I'm not getting to work on time. Okay, so you just have to really make sure that you leave yourself enough time to get there and not be rushed. What that looks like virtually, if you know that you are supposed to log in at, let's say, noon, and it's like, okay, well, I want to make sure that I finish up everything by quarter to noon. So if I have to go to the bathroom, I have to go get a drink, I have to just get up and stretch my legs, kind of close my eyes for just a couple minutes because they've been looking at the screen too long, I can do that. And I have plenty of time to do that and not feel like, oh my gosh, now I have to rush. Okay. You want to make sure you have supplies ready. However you take notes, if you need a pen and paper, if you need to record it, whatever you're doing, make sure you have all your supplies ready. If you know the professor's going to ask you to look things up in the book, make sure your book is there. Okay. It's just going to save you a lot of time. Stay awake and attentive. I know for me personally, this is extremely difficult when things are virtual. I actually commend all of you for doing your learning virtually because I don't think I would have made it through undergraduate or graduate school doing virtual classes because of this reason. I will fall asleep. It has nothing to do with being inattentive. I stare at the computer screen and I'm right to bed. It's like, that's what I do. So what do you need to do to stay awake and attentive? Do you need to have a light on? Do you need to have coffee in your hand? Do you need to have, just something going? To be honest, I've heard students sometimes will say that they'll turn their TV on just to have kind of something in the background, not necessarily the noise, they'll put it on mute, but to see something because they need to feel like there's somebody else in the world. So what do you do to stay awake and be attentive? Probably the big key behind that as well would be that you want to make sure you get enough sleep. That's always helpful, but I will say I understand that sometimes virtually that's not enough. Pay attention, like I said, to the major points and relationships, particularly when you have a professor who's saying, this is a key part that I want you to listen to, or this is the main idea, or this is going to be on the exam. That's the kind of stuff you really want to make sure, okay, of all the notes I'm going to write, this is it, okay? Listen to lectures ahead of time if you're able. If you're not able, definitely if you can listen to them afterwards. I have a lot of students say, well, I don't have time to sit and listen to another 3-hour lecture that I've already heard. Like I said, you can put it on in the background while you're doing other things, okay? So you don't necessarily need to listen to it 100%. I've had students tell me sometimes that they've missed certain parts of the lecture because they zoned out or they got distracted and something happened. Okay, as you're getting distracted, real quick, just note the time, and write it down on your notepad. That way when you have to go back and listen to the lecture, skip right ahead. Okay, I knew at like the half-hour mark, that's when I got distracted. So let me just zoom ahead to the half-hour mark and I can listen from there, okay? Ask the question. Here's the number one thing is that you are paying the salary of all your professors. So ask the question. If you have a question about something, if you're not understanding that main point, you're not understanding the relationship or even the nitty-gritty, you're not understanding what's being said, ask the question. If you don't ask it in class, reach out to your professor privately and say, hey, I'm really having difficulty with this. Can you explain it to me? Okay? Because like I said, you're paying their salary, make them work for it. Okay? Pay attention to announcements. Lots of times professors will either put an announcement on, I'm not sure if we're all using Canvas now or if we're using Blackboard, but they'll put it on the website or they'll put it online, or sometimes they'll just say it in class. And I have heard students say that they'll have professors who will do that, I think, just to kind of make sure people are paying attention. Whenever they give announcements, you want to make sure you're paying attention to that, because while the syllabus may seem like it's set in stone, the professor has the ability to change it. Okay. So taking good notes. The Cornell note-taking system is something that I kind of alluded to earlier. It's where you write down on one side of the page, you write down, these are the big key components. And you can even fill that in ahead of time if you know it. If you say, okay, I know according to the syllabus, these are the 3 main points that we're supposed to touch on today in class. Great, write those down. To the right of them, you're just going to kind of put bullet points. Say these are just kind of like some things to help me remember what this is all about. Then at the bottom of the page, you're writing in your own words a little summary, just 3 to 5 sentences. This is what today's lecture was all about. This is what those big key ideas and the details, this is how they all work together and how they apply to real life. Okay. Handwritten, like I said, it can be very difficult to rewrite everything or even to copy all the PowerPoints. I would highly recommend that if you do handwritten notes, that what you would do is focus either in the Cornell note-taking system method, or that you would focus on just a few key points or things that you really need to memorize, things like that, that you would just put on Post-its, kind of post those around so you can study them, or even if you're putting them in a notebook, do bullet points. Please try not to write everything out, because I think you'll find that you're overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that you have to write. Audio notes can be very helpful. Some students thrive with it, some students don't. So it's completely up to you. If you have a smartphone, you always have a recorder, okay? Laptop or tablet, I always think this is a great way to do it in person, but I'm not sure how well that works virtually. I know when I have Zoom going, like right now I have Zoom up, it fills my entire screen, because if I do anything else when I'm trying to Zoom, the Zoom connection gets wonky and it disconnects, or all of a sudden my image will go blank. So I'm not sure how great that is now in the virtual world. You guys would know better than I do with that. I also want to note that students with disabilities can reach out to receive note-taker services for DAS. Those note-taking services are in the form of audio note-taker, which quite frankly it's a subscription service that anybody can use if you wanted to purchase it. Okay, it is a really neat system. What it is it's a web-based program. It allows you to pull in PowerPoints, audio recordings, and any kind of typed notes into one place and kind of organize them. But in the real world, so you definitely want to study daily throughout the semester instead of cramming. I have students who will come to me and say that they didn't do well on their exam, and maybe they had 4 weeks from the time they started learning the material to the time they had the exam, and they told me they studied for a week or maybe 2. That's fine, but if you study for 4 weeks, you're going to know the material a whole lot better. You're going to feel more confident going into it, and you have more time. If you don't understand something and you're not grasping it, you have more time to reach out to a study buddy, reach out to the professor, the TA, anybody who can help you figure it out. So you're not waiting until the last minute to say, oh my gosh, well, I don't know this, I hope they don't ask it, and then find out that they do. Okay. Make and take practice tests. Again, this is another really good time that if you have a study buddy or you have a study group, that's something really good for all of you to kind of do and just kind of quiz each other. Routinely set aside time to study. So talking about organizational skills, I mentioned using the calendar on your phone. If you have a day planner, whatever kind of program you use, definitely put down on there time to study, because if you just say, well, I'm going to study tonight, that's great until all of a sudden you're done with classes at 5 o'clock or maybe even later, and you're just so exhausted and you say, you know what, I'm just going to take a break tonight, I'm not going to study tonight. It happens, okay? And I'm not going to tell you not to do it, because quite frankly, if you're that exhausted, you should be sleeping. But if you know, okay, I definitely want to study 1 hour, like I'm going to study 1 hour tonight, and I've already planned it. So my classes finish at 5, I'm just going to study for that extra hour, and then I'll make dinner and I'm free for the rest of the night. A lot of students will like to study in the mornings. They say, well, I know my classes start at 7. If I get up at 5, I have time to study for an hour before I get started. Even on the weekends, because yes, I think you should be studying on the weekends. Here's my thing. I really cringe when students tell me that they're going to study for like 8 hours on a Saturday or 5 hours or more on a Sunday. They're going to study for this great amount of time. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. So please, please, please make sure if you're studying for that length of time that you're taking ample breaks. Even if you're studying for an hour, take breaks. So studies show that our brains are good for probably about 15 to 20 minutes when we start on something new. Then our attention dips for about 7 to 10 minutes before coming back, and then our attention is good again for another 15, 20 minutes before it dips down again. If you think about Hollywood, they have it down to a science, right? So if you're watching a TV show and you're watching it, you're good for about 15, 20 minutes, and you're like, man, let me check my phone, let me go get a drink, let me go to the bathroom, because you've really, your attention span is kind of waning. All of a sudden, bam, you've got a commercial break. Oh, perfect. Let me go up and get everything that I need to get done. 7 to 10 minutes later, man, I want to see how that ends, or I'm ready to get back to it. The TV show's back on. And about 15, 20 minutes later, just when your attention is going away again, either you have another commercial break or the TV show is over. Okay? Hollywood has this down pat. They know how our brains operate. The problem is that we don't always know how they operate. So if you sit down and you say, I'm going to study for an hour, please have at least 2 breaks in that. Now, I'm not saying long breaks, but 15, 20 minutes in, if you have to set your timer on your phone, set your timer. Think about what can you do for 5 to 10 minutes for a break, okay? If you know that getting on Facebook, getting on Instagram, anything like that is going to really kind of take you away for more than 5, 10 minutes, those are not the things I would do for a break. But get up, stretch, walk around the house, walk around, just outside for a minute, go get some fresh air, get a drink, anything like that. Even if it's like, okay, I know I can check the headlines and I'll be good for 5, 10 minutes, do that. Come back, you will feel more refreshed. Your brain will be more refreshed, so it will retain information better. And at the end of your study session, you will feel a lot more relaxed than you did if you just barreled through for an hour. I promise you. So when you're studying, if you pick 8 hours a day to study, on a Saturday or on a Sunday, please, please, please be taking breaks every 15, 20 minutes. After a couple hours, you definitely want to take a longer break, like a 30-minute break. If you have ever worked retail, you know that legally, if you work 6 hours, you have to have at least one 30-minute break in there. It's because they know we just don't function, for 6 hours straight with no nice break. So please, please take plenty of breaks. But you want to make sure that you put that into your timetable. So you say, okay, I know I'm going to take a lot of breaks. Let me make sure that I'm still getting in all the study that I want to get in. Okay, set a schedule, especially if one is not set for you. This is one that I'm hearing a lot from students right now, particularly ones who have courses that don't require them to be sitting in front of a camera like this. They're ones that they can listen to the recordings anytime, or just kind of do it their own pace. You want to make sure you set that schedule for yourself, because if you don't have a schedule, you're going to find that your motivation starts to go down, your distractions will start to go up, okay? Because, well, why would I listen to the lecture when it's gorgeous out, the weather's changing, it's beautiful, I want to go walk the dog, or I want to go, just hang out in the park, or, something like that. Okay, yes, definitely do those things, but you want to make sure you get that lecture in first. But if you have that set schedule and you stick to it, you will do a whole lot better, okay? Study in different locations if possible. The main reason for this is because just, again, it's one of those tricks on our brain. If you study in only one location, but you take a test in a different location, sometimes your brain can just be a little jarred, okay? So maybe today you're going to study here, tomorrow you'll study outside, maybe study at Starbucks if you have the opportunity and want to do that. So study in different locations if possible. If it's not possible, that's, you can't do it, but if possible, definitely try. All right, so in the real world, you want to avoid distractions or noisy areas. So I show this guy watching the TV while he's trying to focus on his work, and play with his phone at the same time. Now, I will say some people thrive with having background noise, and to some extent, I will say I do as well. But you want to make sure it's not distracting noise, okay? So if I'm trying to focus on something, I'm probably going to have something like the Golden Girls on in the background that I'm not really paying a lot of attention to, okay? It's just kind of an easygoing program. I've got it on, and I can pay attention to what I'm doing. I'm not going to put on, let's say, for instance, the Stanley Cup playoffs, because I guarantee I'm not paying attention to anything in front of me except the Stanley Cup playoffs, particularly if my team is in it, which they're not this year, but I still will be paying attention. So you want to know what are your distractions and what are just background noise, okay? Don't ignore stolen moments. What I consider stolen moments are things like, if you're going to be waiting in line somewhere. I think the phone, if you have a smartphone, it can be an invaluable tool. You can save things on your Google Drive and access them on here. You can take pictures of your notes and access them on here. You can use Quizlet or Khan Academy and study on here. So while you're waiting in line, you can be looking through things. You can be doing anything like that. If you're going to the bathroom and you're going to be a while, take your stuff with you to look at. Who's going to know? Okay, especially if you have the phone with you. I always say that's just a huge asset to be able to have it at our fingertips. Any, if you're taking the bus, it's a great time to go through things. Study with someone. You can kind of see this infographic here. You see everybody's kind of studying virtually, but they're still together. So even if you guys aren't in person together, if you're not comfortable with that, still meet virtually with someone, even if it's just by text, and say, hey, I just have a question about this. Can you explain it to me? So that you have someone else to bounce your ideas off of and to kind of share things with. Because they say if you can teach something, then you really know it better. So if someone else comes to you and says, hey, this is what I'm really struggling with, do you understand it? Yes, I do. Let me tell you all about it. Now you've studied, that other person has studied, and you've both grown in your knowledge. Okay, so study with someone, even if it's just one other person. All right, and then so who can you call if you're having any kind of concerns on campus? Division for Academic Success, that's my office. Study groups, ask the professor if you need help. And then self-care, which is humongous. You have the Well, which is located primarily on the Monroe Park campus, but they do have outreach and stuff with the MCD campus as well. University Counseling, that is free counseling for all students on the MCD campus. It is located on the 4th floor of the VMI building, okay? And again, free for you. Doesn't go on your record that you ever saw counseling. Student Health Services, that's of course just like primary care. That's on the 3rd floor of the VMI building, okay? And I will say this about university counseling as well. I know I have had a number of students who have not been very comfortable going to university counseling for one reason or another, whether they didn't want people to see them go there or they just didn't feel comfortable being with, people who were affiliated with VCU. If you want an outside referral to counseling, I do have a good list of places that I refer students. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to send that to you, okay? So again, I'm going to emphasize that self-care. I can take better care of others because I take care of myself, okay? Some ideas for self-care. I give these because I have a lot of students who will say, well, I don't have time for self-care right now. I usually go to the gym and I don't have time for that. Or the gym isn't open now, things like that. Self-care can be very, very small. So when I'm showing you my phone and I have the Grinch on it, I keep the Grinch on all year long because the Grinch makes me happy. It's like one of my favorite Christmas things. All right, that's self-care. Because if I'm having a really rough day, I can just flip over my phone and say, oh, isn't that cute? Okay, so it can be something very small. It can be wearing a pair of your favorite earrings. It can be wearing colors that you like. It can be having stickers on your laptop that make you happy. The number one thing for self-care is sleep, nutrition. You want to make sure you're eating healthy. You want to make sure you're scheduling your downtime. So when I'm telling you to make that list on your calendar of like, here's my study time, here's my class time, make sure you put in there some downtime for yourself, okay? Even 30 minutes a day, all right? You have to have some time where it's just you and you're able to do something for yourself, okay? Make it meaningful to you. So I'm a hand quilter. I can sit here and say, that's what I need to do at least 30 minutes a day to feel sane. I'm not going to tell you to do that if that's not something that you do, okay? So make it meaningful to you. Make it something that works for you. Seek help if you need it. Counseling, academic advising, massage is a great thing. Natural supports, those are anybody in your life that you can reach out to if you need somebody. Okay, pay attention to the details, stuff that you like. What are your hobbies? What are, do you like to watch movies? Do you like to read? Getting together with family and or friends. I know sometimes this is a little more tricky in the COVID era. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable with that. How can I still connect with them? That's not necessarily in person. Exercise, that's the big one when people say, well, I can't get to the gym. There are a lot of ways to exercise without going to the gym. Okay, people did it long before gyms existed. So you can do it at home. You can do it, walk around the neighborhood. If you go to campus for classes, goodness knows you'll be getting plenty of exercise walking from wherever it is that you park. If you're not feeling like you get enough exercise there, you can walk over to Capitol Square. It's a beautiful area to walk around. Meditate, pray, whatever spiritual practice is most helpful for you. Definitely make sure that you're partaking in those things. Okay. Here are some resources to use. I'll leave this up for a minute in case you want to take a screenshot or take a picture. I think that Chelsea said that she was going to make this PowerPoint available to you so you would have these in there. Audio note taker is what I had spoken to you about before for organizing all of your lectures. So these are just some things that are free or not necessarily always cost a whole lot that you may want to look into for note taking. So I know I kind of went through that very quickly, so I'm going to pause here and see if anybody has any questions. I know sometimes students aren't always eager to ask questions in person or, in front of other people. So if you want to reach out to me, I will say please reach out to me by email rather than by telephone. I'm kind of doing the hybrid teleworking thing. So while I do check my voicemail, I'm probably not going to get it as quickly as I get the email. Okay, so do we have any questions?
Yes, one quick question. If you could go back to the previous slide, one slide ahead, as far as the resources, I believe.
Sure.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And as Bernie mentioned, we'll also be sharing the slide on our website as far as resources. So it'll be available to you at any point in time that you want to access it. That link will be available in the follow-up email, so you'll have that information.